When you are constantly pushed, belittled, humiliated, abused, blamed for things that are not your responsibility, when you are made to walk on eggshells, when you are kept hyper vigilant and hyper attuned to the environment so that you can foresee what is coming and prepare for the same, how else would you react than become this animalistic version of yourself who just reacts to the environment without thinking, who just does what is being done to them? Because how else can you control and handle an environment that is filled with so much adversity? You start reacting, and that is what we call reactive abuse. When the narcissist pushes you to your limits, when they break every single boundary and violate you in every single way possible, you start acting aggressively. You start acting the way they act. You start yelling and screaming, hoping that would control them. You need to understand that reactive abuse is a normal reaction. A normal reaction to an abnormal amount of crap that this person puts you through. They abuse you and torture you to the point of you turning almost into them and behaving in similar ways, and then shaming you through your reactions, weaponizing these reactions against you so that they can escape their abuse, their doings. Hi, I'm Danish, a narcissistic abuse recovery professional. Today's episode is going to be all about understanding what reactive abuse is, why it happens, and how should you process and understand it. First of all, let's look at the dynamics of a narcissistic relationship. The dynamics of a narcissistic relationship are far more complicated than what is visible on the surface. There is gaslighting, there is manipulation, there is constant twisting, there is framing, there is reframing. The narcissist constantly makes it your fault and makes it believable that everything that is happening in the relationship is your fault. You're convinced that you are the crazy one, you are making things happen, so you try to fix things more. Ultimately, as things happen and as time passes, the narcissist doesn't stop and escalates in their abuse. They keep torturing you more and more with every single day, every single week and month passing. A time eventually comes when you have had it enough, and the abuse that they're putting you through, it just crosses all the tolerable limits. And at that point, your extreme survival instincts get activated. You start reacting to the environment because the environment is adverse. It is not your fault. You have been designed, you have been created that way. And talking about the survival instinct, you have four responses: fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. Now, first you try to run away from the environment. You try to avoid things. You try to fawn a little bit. You try to give in a little bit so that you can calm the situation a little bit down, but none of it works. And then finally the fight, extreme fight and aggressive, this rage response gets activated, and that extreme survival instinct and power gets awakened in you, and you start reacting to the narcissist by doing the same things. When I say the same things, I mean if they hit you, you start hitting them back. If they yell at you, you start yelling at them back. If they give you silent treatments, you give them silent treatment back. If they withhold attention, you do that back. You become this bitter, cold, unempathetic version of yourself that is not actually you. You just turn into this shell that has no emotions at all, because every single emotion that you have ever displayed in the relationship was used against you. So your system shuts everything down and makes you this extreme, reactive, hard and cold, emotionless version of yourself so that you can combat the narcissist effectively and keep them cornered. Reacting to the narcissist's abuse creates a cognitive dissonance about self. You stop recognizing who you are, because before meeting the narcissist and before reacting to their abuse, before becoming this aggressive, cold, reactive version of yourself, you had integrity, you had compassion, you had empathy, you had feelings, you experienced the full spectrum of the emotions. And now you are this version of yourself that is quite reactive, that doesn't sit well, that doesn't fit well with who you are or how you define yourself as. And that creates a lot of incongruity and therefore a conflict within, which creates more anger. You become angry towards yourself, like, how can I be this? Who am I? What have I been reduced to? Is this real? How can I be this person? How can I treat them the way they treated me? How can I become this pathetic person? How can I stoop to their level? But you need to understand that it is beyond your conscious control. This cognitive dissonance that you see, that you were someone else and you became someone else, you did not choose to become this shell of a version of yours. You were abused and tortured. You were put in this psychological concentration camp where every single resource, every single amenity, every single thing that kept you stable was taken away from you. And on top of that, you were tortured every single moment. You were blamed and shamed constantly. You were called things that degraded you, that demoralized you. You were made to think that the reality that you perceive is not how it is. You were made to question yourself, your motives and intentions. And if that happens, how else would you behave than react? You need to understand that this difference between who you are and who you have been, who you actually are, does not mean that you have turned into a narcissist. This is what we call narcissistic fleas. You have these narcissistic traits, if we can call them that for a moment, or you are reacting to the abuse. This is quite temporary. This is all a combination of survival skills that you needed to survive in an adverse environment like this. So you need to leave first, and once you leave, the more stable you feel in the nervous system, the more you feel safe, the better you would be, which means the closer you would get to becoming who you actually are. These narcissistic fleas would just go away. You would get rid of them once you change your environment, once that person is gone, once that person leaves your psyche. However you reacted in the relationship was a set of adaptive coping skills that you needed because the narcissist was at the point of erasing you, your personality, your identity. They were about to emotionally murder you. They were about to assassinate you. So you had to take drastic measures to save and protect yourself. Think of it this way. If you have to fight a war, of course, in the war, you would not be happy. You would be hypervigilant. You would be fighting back. You would be firing the bullets. You would be exposed to a lot of danger. You would have to think of ways to protect yourself. So same is the case here. When your brain was fried to the point of ultimate collapse and ultimate death, it had to think of different ways. These ways maybe do not match with your moral values. They do not sink in with your conscience, or they are not in the direction of your moral compass. But that does not mean these responses were invalid or they were not a part of you. You need to acknowledge them. You need to accept yourself as a whole, and that radical acceptance would help you to let go. And if you feel like you should, you can forgive yourself. Because forgiveness also can set you free. You can accept that it was not me, it was someone that I had to become in order to survive. That is the key point and the key takeaway from this discussion today. It was someone that you had to become to survive. The narcissist then used this reaction against you to shame you, to blame you even further, and of course that added fuel to the fire. You started believing that, yes, I am crazy because I said that, I yelled, I also slapped, I also did this, I also kicked the door. Just understand that they pushed you to the extreme limits and they almost made you do it, and then they were waiting until you did it, and finally when you did it, they used it against you. They needed the fuel because that way they could control you even more. If you feel guilty about your actions, if your own conscience starts berating you, if that critical voice starts shaming you, then for the narcissist, the job becomes easier. It is very easy for them to make you tiptoe around their commands and make you do things that you wouldn't have done otherwise. So understanding reactive abuse as a normal survival reaction to an abnormal amount of abuse that you have survive. Well, all kinds and intensities of abuse are abnormal. In this context, I'm saying that it crossed every single level imaginable, every single way they abused you, tortured you, so you got to a point of ultimate collapse and you had to react. The primal survival instinct to save and protect yourself came out of you, and that is what it was. Accepting it and integrating it will set you free. That was it for today's episode. I hope you found it insightful. If you did, let me know in the comments below and make sure to subscribe and share this video. I'll talk with you in the next one. Until then, let the healing begin.